When my father went away on business trips, I would hear the laughter in the kitchen and know it was time to hide. "It's good to see you nearly dead," my own mother would say as she watched everything from the shadows. Only a piece of stained bedsheet could save me from that hell. Oh, my dears, how wonderful to have you here with me today. My name is Josephine Adams Carter. I'm 73 years old and blessed with every one of them, and I live here in Asheville, North Carolina. I was born in Riverdale, right along the Mississippi River, but life brought me to these mountains many years ago. Today, my greatest pleasure is tending to my medicinal herb garden. I have a little bit of everything: rosemary, mint, lemon balm, lemongrass, basil. Each plant has its well-tended bed. I wake up early, before the sun even appears, make my fresh brewed coffee, and go straight to the yard. Is there anything more delightful than feeling the damp earth in the early morning? It's a blessing God gives me every day. I started this garden after my late husband, Gerald, passed away almost 10 years ago. It was a way to occupy my mind and heart. In the beginning, I knew nothing about plants. Can you believe it? I learned from my neighbors, from books my grandchildren brought me, and today I even make teas and salves that help many folks around here. People come with their aches and afflictions, and they always leave with a little natural remedy and words of comfort. My house isn't big, but it has a welcoming porch where I put some flower pots and an old rocking chair. From there, I see the mountains in the distance and give thanks for each day I receive. The walls are light blue, a color that brings peace, and inside I have my simple things arranged my way. In the living room, a small altar with a picture of Jesus and photographs of the whole family. Before I continue, I'd like to ask a small favor from you who are watching me. If you enjoy my story, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps bring these life stories to more people who need to hear them. And tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from, and what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening with the stars coming out? I always read all the comments and feel so happy knowing where you're from and when you take a little time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. Today I'm going to share with you a difficult story that I've kept in my heart for many years. It's about survival, about those moments in life when we need to find strength where we thought nothing existed anymore. A story about the silence that hurts and the courage that saves. My childhood was marked by a terrible secret that happened within the walls of our house, far from the town's eyes, but right under the gaze of those who should have protected me. It's this journey I want to talk about today, about how a frightened little girl found a way to seek justice and survive to tell this story. I was born and raised on a remote farm, a good few miles from Riverdale. It was a large property, one of those old ones, with a big house with tall windows and a porch that wrapped around the entire building. Back then, in the early 50s, life in rural Mississippi was something else, my dears. There was no electricity, running water was a luxury of big cities, and the dirt road that led there became impassable when it rained hard. My father, Jacob Adams, was a hard-working man, of few words, but with a good heart. Tall, strong, with hands calloused from so much work. He had a thick mustache that tickled me when he gave me a goodnight kiss. He was a traveling salesman, you know? He would travel for weeks, sometimes months, selling goods between towns across the southern states. That's how he supported our large family. My mother, Ida, was a woman hard as stone. Her hair was always tied in a tight bun, and she had a gaze that seemed to cut right through you. She didn't smile much, no. She spent her days taking care of the house, giving orders, always busy, always vigilant. When I remember her, I see her dry hands from washing clothes in the tub and her always impeccable apron without a single stain. We were 8 children, and I was the youngest and only girl. My brothers, in order of age, were Oscar, the oldest, already 21 when I was born. Then came Alfred, 19, James, 17, the twins Theodore and Arnold, 15, Eugene, 13, and finally Jerome, 11. I came 7 years after Jerome, when my mother already thought she wouldn't have any more children. Perhaps that's why she never seemed very happy about my arrival. Our house was large but simple. On the ground floor, we had the living room with its old, heavy furniture, the dining room with a long table where we all sat for meals, the spacious kitchen with a wood stove and pantry, and a small room where my father kept his travel things. Upstairs were the bedrooms, a large one for my parents, 2 for my brothers who slept divided, and a tiny one at the end of the hallway that was just mine. The walls were thick, made of brick, and the wooden floor creaked with every step. My childhood had a well-defined routine. I woke up with the rooster's crow, drank a glass of fresh milk with cornbread, and went to help with the household chores my mother determined. I swept the yard, fed the chickens, helped hang the clothes on the line. When there was time left, I played alone in the yard, making mud houses or corn-husk dolls. School? Oh, it was too far away. I only went occasionally, when one of my brothers could take me by wagon to the rural schoolhouse about 4 miles from home. The teacher, Miss Zelma, was patient with me, understood my absences, and gave me lessons to do at home. It was she who taught me to read and write, a gift I cherish to this day. The people in the region were few and distant from each other. Our closest neighbor, Mrs. Catherine, lived almost a half-hour walk away. She was a widow who raised goats and made a mouth-watering cheese. Sometimes I would go there, take fresh eggs that my mother sent, and return with a piece of cheese or caramel. Life changed completely when my father was home. He brought joy, told stories of his travels, sometimes even candies and colorful ribbons for me. On those days, even my mother seemed lighter, more alive. The house gained a different atmosphere. My brothers respected my father, behaved better, helped with the farm tasks without complaining. But my heart would tighten when we saw my father packing his bags again. He would tie his few belongings to the back of his station wagon, adjust his hat on his head, and leave down the dusty road, becoming a smaller and smaller dot on the horizon. And then, a heavy silence fell over our house, like a shadow that swallows everything. It was around my 6th year that I began to notice something strange. Whenever my father left for one of his long trips, my brothers behaved differently. I observed their looks, the way they whispered among themselves, the laughter I didn't understand when my mother gathered them in the kitchen after dinner. I was small, but I already felt a chill in my stomach, a fear I couldn't explain. Our house was too big, full of dark corners and creaking doors. At night, lying in my little bed, I would hear the sounds of the old wood, the wind on the roof tiles, and sometimes footsteps in the hallway that made me pull the blanket up to cover my head. But what scared me most weren't the noises of the old house. It was the silences that came after. I remember once, I was about 7. I was playing in the yard with a cloth doll that Mrs. Catherine had made for me. I saw my brother Oscar looking at me differently from the kitchen door. He called the others, and soon they were all there, watching me like I was some curious little animal. My mother appeared behind them and said something I didn't understand, but that made them all go back inside. That night, I locked the door to my little room for the first time. Poverty was great, but we didn't go hungry. We had the garden, the chickens, some heads of cattle. The money my father brought from his trips was little, but enough for the essentials. What was really missing was affection, you know? That motherly hug, that word of comfort. I only received that from my father, and he spent more time away than at home. As I grew older, I began to better understand the world around me. I understood the harshness of life in the rural South, the isolation, the constant work. But there was something more, something that grew like a shadow in the corners of our house, especially in the weeks when my father traveled. The year I turned 8 was when everything started to become clearer to me. It was fall, I remember as if it were yesterday. The leaves were falling in the yard, forming yellowed carpets, and the cold wind already announced the winter that was coming. My father had prepared his bags for a long trip. He would go to northern Alabama and wouldn't return for 2 months. The night before his departure, we were all in the living room after dinner. My father, sitting in his usual chair, called me over. He put me on his lap, as he did when I was smaller, and said words I keep to this day. "Josie, my little wildflower, take care of yourself while Dad is away. Be obedient to your mother and respect your brothers. I'll bring a nice present for you when I return." I hugged my father with all the strength I had, as if guessing that I would need to save that warmth for a long time. I smelled the tobacco mixed with the lye soap that my mother made. That was my father's smell. Early in the morning, before the rooster even crowed, he had already left. That same day, I noticed something different in the air. My mother, Ida, had a strange gleam in her eyes as she swept the yard. My brothers exchanged glances, and I felt their eyes following me around the house, around the yard, wherever I went. The oldest, Oscar, called me princess during lunch, a word that came out of his mouth like something dirty. At night, after washing the dinner dishes, I was preparing to go upstairs and take refuge in my little room when I heard my mother calling all my brothers to the kitchen. "Come, my sons, let's talk a bit," she said, without looking at me. One by one, they went into the kitchen: Oscar, Alfred, James, the twins, Theodore and Arnold, Eugene, and even Jerome, who was the youngest of them. I went up to my room, but curiosity was great. I silently returned to the hallway and approached the kitchen door, which was just ajar. From where I was, I could hear the muffled voices, the giggles, the conspiratorial tone. Then I heard my mother's voice, clear as crystal. "She's already at the age. Dad won't be back so soon. You're the men of the house now." A shiver ran through my entire body. I didn't understand exactly what that meant, but I knew, in the depths of my child's heart, that it was something terrible. I ran to my room, locked the door, and pushed my small dresser against it. That night, I slept fully dressed, curled up under the bed, hugging the cloth doll that was my only friend. For a few days, nothing happened beyond the looks, the whispers, the giggles when I passed by. I began to avoid being alone with any of my brothers. I made up excuses not to go to the barn, to the corn crib, to any place where I could be cornered. My mother noticed, I'm sure, but pretended not to see my growing fear. One afternoon, I was helping hang clothes on the line when I saw Oscar and Alfred talking near the chicken coop. They were looking at me and laughing. James joined them, and soon the three were walking in my direction. I dropped the basket of clothes and ran into the house, near my mother who was preparing dinner. "What's this, girl? Why this running?" she asked, without raising her eyes from the pot of beans. "The boys. They were looking at me in a strange way, Mom," I replied with a trembling voice. She finally looked at me, but there was no concern in her eyes. There was something different, something I only understood many years later. "Your brothers are just playing, Josephine. They're men, it's natural. You need to learn to deal with it." It was the first time I understood that I would have no protection from my mother. That frightened me more than my brother's looks. The following night, about a week after my father's departure, I heard footsteps in the hallway, near my room. The old wooden floor creaked under someone's weight. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The doorknob turned, but the door was locked. Then I heard whispered voices, more than one person. They tried once more and gave up. The next morning during breakfast, Eugene commented, looking directly at me, "That door won't stay locked forever, Princess." They all laughed, including my mother, who served them more coffee as if nothing had happened. I started planning my days carefully. I woke up before everyone to use the outhouse, ate quickly, and looked for tasks that kept me in sight of my mother or close to Mrs. Catherine's house. Sometimes I pretended to be sick so I could stay in bed all day, with the door locked. The situation worsened when I discovered that the key to my room had disappeared. I searched everywhere, desperate, but I knew deep down that one of them had taken it. That night, I arranged a piece of wood and wedged it under the doorknob, as I had seen my father do once during a strong storm. It was on a Friday, late in the afternoon, that it happened for the first time. I was in the yard, picking some tomatoes in the garden, when I saw that I was surrounded. Oscar, Alfred, and James had strategically positioned themselves around me, blocking any escape route. Theodore and Arnold were watching the entrance to the house. Eugene and Jerome were further away, but observing everything. "Come here, little sister," Oscar called, extending his hand. "We just want to talk to you." I looked around, desperate, and saw my mother at the kitchen window. Our eyes met for a moment. I silently begged for help, but she simply closed the curtain and disappeared. "No, leave me alone," I shouted, throwing the tomatoes at them and running to the only place that seemed safe at that moment, the empty corral, where I could hide among the hay bales. They followed me, calling my name, turning it into a macabre hunt. I managed to squeeze into a small space between the bales where they couldn't easily reach me. I stayed there, trembling, until it was completely dark. Only then, when the house was already silent, did I risk coming out and running to my room. In the following days, the tension only increased. The house, which was already a cold place, became a prison, a minefield where every corner could hide a threat. My brothers didn't give up. On the contrary, the game of terrorizing me seemed to amuse them more and more. One night, I woke up to the sound of my door being opened. My improvisation with the piece of wood hadn't worked. I tried to scream, but a large hand covered my mouth. It was Oscar. Behind him, I saw the silhouettes of the others. And then, in the dark hallway, the figure of my mother, watching, doing nothing to prevent it. "Shh, princess," Oscar whispered. "It's time for you to learn what happens when Dad's not home." What happened next? Well, there are things that even after so many years, my mouth refuses to tell. But my body remembers. My soul remembers. Remembers the darkness, the muffled sounds, the pain, the paralyzing fear. And afterwards, the silence. The worst was afterwards, when everyone left except my mother. She entered the room, lit the kerosene lamp, and looked me up and down. Her eyes showed no compassion. They showed satisfaction. She examined my hurt body, the torn sheets, the marks I tried to hide. It was then that she said those words that were engraved in me like a hot iron. "It's good to see you bleed. It shows that they are strong, real men, like their father." At that moment, I understood that it wasn't just my brothers against me. It was my own mother, too. The person who should protect me was proud of what they had done to me. After that first night, something inside me broke. I became a shadow in my own house, trying to be invisible, looking to hide in corners, avoiding any contact. But it was no use. In an isolated house like ours, there was nowhere to run, no one who could help me. The weeks dragged on, each day seeming like an eternity. I learned to recognize the signs, the looks exchanged between them during dinner, the way my mother called them to the kitchen afterwards and closed the door. And then I knew that night, they would come. It didn't matter where I hid, in the dusty attic, in the damp cellar, behind the hay bales in the corral. They always found me. "She's getting good at this, at hiding," I heard Alfred comment once, laughing with the others. "Makes the hunt more fun." And my mother, my mother. She never participated directly, but was always nearby, watching from the shadows, sometimes giving instructions, suggestions. And afterwards, always afterwards, came that cold inspection, that look of approval at seeing my suffering. "You're not special, girl," she told me once, as I cried, curled up in bed. "All the women in the family went through this. This is how a woman learns her place in this house." It was then that I understood. This wasn't something new. It was a perverse tradition, passed down from generation to generation. My mother had probably lived through the same horror in her youth, and now, instead of protecting her own daughter, she perpetuated the cycle. The worst was when I tried to seek help. Once, I managed to get to Mrs. Catherine's house. I was hurt, with marks on my arms that I couldn't hide. the good woman noticed that something was wrong. "What happened to you, child?" she asked, applying a salve to my abrasions. "I fell from the barn," I lied, eyes downcast. I wanted to tell her, God knows how much I wanted to. But the words were stuck in my throat. And even if I could speak, what could Mrs. Catherine do? An elderly widow against 7 men and my mother? When I returned home that day, my mother was waiting for me at the door, arms crossed, stern look. "Been talking what you shouldn't with old Catherine?" she asked, squeezing my arm hard. "No, Mom, I didn't say anything. Better that way. No one would believe you anyway. And if you tried to tell anyone again—" She didn't complete the sentence, but her look said it all. There was a threat there, a silent promise that things could get even worse. After that day, I lost the last hope of external help. I was completely alone. Over time, I developed small strategies to survive. I learned to dissociate, to separate my mind from my body during the worst moments. I imagined I was far away, flying like the birds I saw from my bedroom window, free in the Mississippi sky. I created a safe place inside my head where no one could hurt me. I also discovered small hiding places around the farm, a hole in the barn wall covered by loose boards, the space between the roof and the ceiling in the attic, the old dry well at the back of the property. Places where I could hide for a few hours, where I could cry without being heard. I started keeping food, pieces of bread, dried fruit, anything that wouldn't spoil quickly. I hid them in my refuges for the days when I couldn't face the dinner table, the looks, the giggles, their suffocating presence. My health began to deteriorate. I lost so much weight that my ribs showed through my skin. My hair, once strong and shiny, began to fall out in clumps. I had constant nightmares and often wet the bed, which only served as another excuse for punishments. School became a temporary refuge on the days I could go. Miss Zelma noticed the change in me. I, who had once been a curious and talkative girl, now barely opened my mouth, sat at the back of the classroom, and shrank when someone approached me. "Josephine, what's happening, my dear?" she asked once, calling me after class. Once again, the words didn't come out. The fear was greater than any desire for salvation. I just shook my head and muttered that everything was fine, that I was just tired. Time passed, and my father didn't return. The trip that should have lasted 2 months extended to 3, then 4. Later I discovered that there was a flood that blocked the roads, preventing his return. Each additional day was a sentence, a prolongation of my torment. At home, the abuses became more frequent, more violent. My brothers seemed to compete among themselves to see who could hurt me more. And my mother watched it all with that same look of sick satisfaction. "You're making my sons into real men," she said one night, as she passed a damp cloth over my wounds, not out of compassion, but to prevent them from becoming infected and drawing attention when my father returned. I began to think about running away. I planned to gather what little money I could, some coins forgotten in my brother's pants pockets when I washed clothes, some change Mrs. Catherine gave me when I helped her with the goats. I imagined taking the road and going far away, to any place that wasn't that cursed farm. But where would an 8-year-old girl go, alone in the world? How would I survive? And there was always the fear that they would find me and bring me back, and then things would be even worse. One night, after a particularly brutal abuse, I lay on the floor of my room, feeling the cold wood against my face. For the first time, I thought about giving up completely, about simply closing my eyes and never waking up again. It seemed the only possible way out of that hell. It was then that I heard horse hooves in the yard, a commotion in the house, excited voices. "It's Dad! Dad's back!" It was Jerome's voice, the youngest of my brothers. My heart raced. My father was back. He could save me. But then panic took over me. How to explain my condition? How to tell what had happened without him blaming me, the daughter, instead of the sons he so prized? My mother ran into the room with a basin of water and clean cloths. "Get up, girl. Your father is coming. Clean that face, put on clean clothes. And if he asks, you fell from the barn, understand? Fell from the barn several times. She helped me wash and dress, combed my thin hair to hide the bald spots, made me drink a bitter tea to give color to your cheeks, and took me to the living room. My father entered, carrying his bags and sacks of merchandise. He seemed bigger than I remembered, stronger, more secure. I ran to him, hugging his legs, smelling the familiar scent of road dust and tobacco. "My little Josie," he exclaimed, lifting me in his arms. But then he stopped, looking at me carefully. "What happened to you, child? You're so skinny, so pale." Before I could answer, my mother intervened. "She's been sick, Jacob. A fever that wouldn't pass. And this girl is so clumsy, always falling, hurting herself." My father frowned, not entirely convinced. He passed his hand over my face, noticing the dark spots under my eyes, the cracked lips. "I'm going to take you to the doctor in Riverdale next week, daughter." That night was different. With my father at home, my brothers kept their distance. The house seemed to breathe different air. We all dined together at the big table, like a normal family. My father told stories of his trip, brought presents for everyone, including a small carved wooden comb for me, which I kept as a treasure. But I knew it was just a temporary truce. As soon as my father left again, everything would return to normal. The horror would begin again. And it was at that moment, sitting at the table, watching my brothers pretend to be good sons, my mother playing the role of dedicated wife, that something inside me strengthened. A small flame of resistance that refused to be extinguished. If I told my father what happened during his absence, would he believe me? Or would he believe the version of my mother and my 7 brothers? It was the word of a child against 8 adults. I needed proof. I needed something my father couldn't ignore, that would force him to see the horrible truth that hid under the roof of our house. And so in silence, I began to plan. The next time my father traveled would be different. I would be prepared. I would no longer be a passive victim, but a determined survivor seeking justice. My father stayed home for almost a month. They were the only days of peace I knew in that dark period of my life. He noticed that something was wrong. I saw it in his eyes when he observed me, in the way he frowned when he noticed me startle when any of my brothers approached me. But my mother's explanations seemed to temporarily calm him. "She's always been a nervous girl, Jacob, and after that fever, she became even more fearful." As promised, he took me to the doctor in Riverdale. The doctor examined me, asked questions, which I answered with downcast eyes, repeating the story my mother had forced me to memorize. We returned with a bottle of tonic and the recommendation of reinforced nutrition for the girl. One afternoon, while my father was fixing the corral fence, I approached him. I wanted so much to tell him, wanted to throw myself into his arms and let the words come out, all at once. But the fear was greater. What if he didn't believe me? What if he got angry with me? Worse yet, what if he believed me, confronted my brothers and mother, and then left again, leaving me at their mercy, now with even more anger? "What is it, Josie?" he asked, noticing my hesitation. "Nothing, Dad," I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I just wanted to be near you." He smiled, that good smile that lit up his tired face, and let me help him, holding the tools while he worked. Small moments like this were my only consolation. But then came the day I so feared. My father announced during dinner that he needed to leave again. A short trip this time, just 3 weeks, to deliver an important order in Charlotte. "I'll be back before the 4th of July, he promised, messing up my hair, "and we'll make a big bonfire, roast corn, and sweet potatoes, like you like." That night, I couldn't sleep. I knew what would happen as soon as my father crossed the gates of the farm. I knew that the kitchen meeting would happen, that the looks would return, that the nightmare would start again. But this time, something was different inside me. It wasn't just fear. It was anger. an anger that grew like a burning ember in my chest. The next morning, my father left at the first crow of the rooster. I watched from my bedroom window as he drove away down the dirt road, becoming smaller and smaller until he disappeared around the bend. I didn't cry this time. I was busy planning. I didn't have to wait long. That same night, after dinner, I heard my mother's call. "Boys, come to the kitchen. We need to talk." I quickly went up to my room, locked the door with the new key my father had provided after I complained that the old one had disappeared, and pushed the dresser against it, as I always did. But this time, I didn't hide. I took a small knife I had stolen from the kitchen days before and hid it under the mattress. Not to use against them, they were too many and too strong, but to give me courage, to feel that I had some control. The hours passed. The house grew silent. It was late when I heard the footsteps in the hallway, the familiar creaking of the floorboards, whispered voices. She locked the door again. "Break it down. No, Dad will notice. I have a better idea." I heard someone walking away and then returning. A metallic sound. They were using some tool on the lock. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would explode in my chest. The door suddenly opened. The dresser was pushed aside with ease by Oscar and Alfred. Behind them, the other 5. And in the hallway, as always, the silhouette of my mother. What happened next was different from the other times. Maybe because I had dared to lock the door again. Maybe because my father's presence for a month had intensified their anger. It was worse. Much worse. I remember the muffled screams, the hands holding me, the pain that seemed would split me in half. I remember begging, crying, finally finding my voice and screaming for help. But there was no one to hear on that isolated farm. And afterward, as always, my mother entered. The boys left, leaving me like a rag thrown on the bed. She lit the kerosene lamp and inspected me, as she always did. But this time, even she seemed momentarily frightened by what she saw. "They went a bit too far," she muttered, more to herself than to me. Then her face hardened again. "But you provoked it, locking the door, defying them." She left and returned with a basin of warm water and some cloths. She began to clean the wounds, not with gentleness, but with the practical efficiency of someone who doesn't want the evidence to remain. And while doing this, she repeated those horrible words. "It's good to see you bleed." It shows that they are strong, real men, like their father. Something broke inside me at that moment. It wasn't just physical pain. It was a pain of the soul, a deep understanding that this woman, my own mother, not only allowed the horror, but delighted in it. "Why?" I managed to murmur, my voice almost inaudible. "Why do you let them do this to me?" She stopped what she was doing and looked me directly in the eyes for the first time in a long time. There was something icy in her gaze, something dead. Because that's how I learned to be a woman in this house. That's how it was with my mother, with my grandmother. It's the way things are. The Adams men need to be strong, and the women need to learn their place. She continued cleaning the wounds, throwing the dirty cloths in the basin. The water turned red. "When you grow up, you'll understand. You'll thank me for having learned early." After she left, I lay in the darkness, feeling every part of my body scream with pain. But my mind was strangely clear. Her words echoed in my head. That's how it was with my mother, with my grandmother. Generations of women suffering in silence, passing the horror forward like a cursed inheritance. Would I be the next to perpetuate this? Would I grow to become like my mother, watching from the shadow while another girl suffered? "No," I whispered to the darkness. "It ends with me." That night, I had a dream. I dreamed of my grandmother, whom I never knew. She was standing in the hallway of the house, looking at me with eyes full of tears. "Break the chain, girl," she said. "Break the chain that binds us all." I woke up with the first rays of the sun. My body ached, but my mind was stronger than ever. I got up with difficulty and looked at the bed. The sheets were stained with blood. Normally, my mother would change them immediately, would wash away all evidence. But she hadn't come yet. It was then that I had the idea. I took a small pair of scissors I used to cut scraps and cut a piece of the stained sheet, a part with the worst stains. I carefully folded it and hid it inside the torn lining of my mattress, where no one would think to look. Later, my mother came to change the sheets. She didn't notice that a piece was missing, or if she noticed, she didn't say anything. She took the dirty bedding and took it to wash in the tub, as she always did. In the days that followed, I did something I had never done before. I refused to hide. Instead, I let them see the marks. When Mrs. Catherine came to visit and asked about the bruises on my arm, I just looked at my mother in silence, challenging her to explain. "The girl fell down the stairs," my mother said quickly, giving me a warning look. "Seems like she falls a lot," observed Mrs. Catherine, with a note of suspicion in her voice. I said nothing, but kept my eyes fixed on Mrs. Catherine's, trying to communicate without words what I couldn't say out loud. My new attitude infuriated my brothers. They were used to seeing me hidden, frightened, submissive. My small, silent rebellion was an affront. "The princess is getting bold," said James one night as we dined. "We need to teach some more lessons." My mother just nodded, as if they were discussing the weather or the harvest. I showed no fear, although inside I was trembling. I knew what would come, but this time I had a plan. When they came that night, I didn't fight like the other times. I didn't beg. I remained silent, letting them do what they always did. It was as if my spirit had separated from my body, hovering above, observing everything from afar. And somewhere inside me, a voice repeated, "This will end. This will end when my father returns." After they left, my mother made her usual inspection. I noticed that she seemed irritated by my lack of reaction. "What's wrong, girl? Lost your tongue?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, trying to memorize every detail of her face, knowing that soon everything would change. She left, visibly disturbed by my silence. As soon as I was alone, I got up, ignoring the pain, and cut another piece of the sheet. This one was even more significant than the first. I hid it with the other. The next morning, I took one of my few clothes, a simple cotton dress, and tore it in some strategic places. I hid that too, along with the pieces of sheet. The days passed slowly. Each night brought the same horror, but now I had a purpose, a light at the end of that dark tunnel. I continued collecting evidence, a piece of torn clothing here, a stained sheet there. I kept everything in the hiding place inside the mattress. A week before the expected date of my father's return, my mother began preparations. The house was cleaned from top to bottom. New sheets were placed on all beds. She called me to the kitchen and looked at me severely. "When your father returns, you will behave normally. You will smile, you will say that you are better, that fever is gone. Understand?" I nodded silently. "And don't even think about telling him anything. He would never believe you against all of us, and if you tried—" She paused, her eyes hard as stones. "Well, you know what would happen after he left again." I knew. But this time would be different. This time I had proof. On the eve of my father's arrival, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, looking at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing what I would do. I would have only one chance. I needed to do it the right way. And then, finally, I heard the sound of car wheels in the yard. My father had returned. The arrival of my father was like the other times. He entered carrying his belongings, his face tired but happy to be home. My brothers received him with pats on the back, questions about the trip, offering help to unload the merchandise he had brought. My mother was at the door, smiling that smile that only appeared when he was present. I waited at the kitchen threshold, observing the scene. My father saw me and opened his arms. "Josie, come here, my little flower." I ran to him, as I always did, But this time there was a weight inside me, the knowledge of what I was about to do. He lifted me in the air and spun me around, then put me on the ground and examined my face. "You look better, thank God. That color has returned to your cheeks." My mother hurried to confirm, "Yes, she improved a lot, Jacob. The tonic that the doctor prescribed worked wonders." The tonic that she never gave me, that stayed stored in the kitchen cabinet untouched. The rest of the day went on normally. We all had dinner together. My father told stories of the trip, said that business had been good. He talked about the 4th of July celebration that would happen in a few days, promised that we would make a big bonfire. "And I'll go to town to buy some firecrackers and sparklers for you boys," he said, drawing smiles from my brothers. I observed them, sitting at the table playing the role of exemplary sons. Oscar, Alfred, James, Theodore, Arnold, Eugene, Jerome. Each one of them smiled and talked as if they hadn't done what they did, as if they weren't monsters. That night I waited. I knew I would need a moment alone with my father, away from my mother's watchful eyes. I lay in bed, but didn't sleep, alert to any sound. In the early morning, I heard my father get up. He used to wake up early before everyone to have coffee and check things on the farm. It was my chance. I got up silently, took the pieces of sheet and clothing I had hidden and put them inside my nightgown. I opened the bedroom door without making a sound and went down the stairs, avoiding the steps that creaked. My father was in the kitchen, alone, drinking coffee. I stopped at the door, suddenly unsure. What if he didn't believe me? What if he got angry? He saw me and smiled, surprised. "Josie, you woke up early today, my daughter. Want some coffee with milk?" I entered the kitchen, my heart beating so hard I thought he could hear it. I sat at the table facing him. "Dad," I began, my voice almost a whisper. "I need to show you something." Something in my tone must have alerted my father. He put the cup on the table and looked at me carefully. "What is it, my daughter?" My hands were trembling when I pulled the pieces of sheet and clothing from inside my nightgown. I placed them on the table, right in front of him. My father looked at the stained rags, not understanding at first. Then, slowly, the understanding began to appear on his face. "What is this, Josie?" he asked, his voice changing tone, becoming deeper. "They're from my sheets, Dad," I replied, gathering all the courage I had. "And this piece is from my dress." My father took the pieces, examining them carefully. His face changed, first confusion, then suspicion, and finally an expression I had never seen before, something between horror and fury. "Who did this to you?" he asked, the words coming out broken, as if each one cost an enormous effort. I took a deep breath. It was the moment. There was no turning back. "My brothers, Dad. All of them. When you travel." My father remained motionless, holding the stained pieces of fabric. I saw his hand tremble, the knuckles turning white from the force with which he squeezed the rags. "And your mother?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible. I felt the tears running down my face, but kept my eyes fixed on his. "She knows. She sees everything. Afterward she comes and says it's good to see me bleed, that it shows they are strong, real men, like you." It was as if I had given a physical blow to my father. He recoiled in the chair, his face as pale as wax. For a terrible moment, I thought he hadn't believed me, that he would call my mother, tell her what I had said, and then everything would be even worse. But then he extended his trembling hand and touched my face, where a bruise was already fading. "This wasn't any fall, was it?" I shook my head. "And the fever?" "I didn't have any fever, Dad. It was a lie from Mom." He remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the stained pieces of fabric. Then slowly, he folded them and kept them in his shirt pocket. When he raised his eyes to me again, there was an iron determination in them. "Go to your room, Josie. Lock the door and don't come out until I call you. Understood?" I nodded, frightened by the intensity in his voice. "Dad, what are you going to do?" "What I should have done a long time ago. Now go, my daughter, and don't be afraid. They will never lay a finger on you again, I promise." I went up to my room, closed the door, and locked it, as he asked. I sat on the bed, hugging my knees, and waited. My heart was beating so hard it seemed it would come out of my mouth. Soon I heard my father's voice, a roar I had never heard before, calling my mother and my brothers. Then came the shouts, his, hers, theirs, objects being broken, doors slamming. It was as if a storm had formed inside our house. I stayed in the room all day, trembling, praying, waiting. From time to time, I heard footsteps in the hallway, raised voices, more shouts. Once, they tried to open the door to my room, but it was locked as my father had instructed. "Open this door, you little witch." It was Oscar's voice, furious. "You'll pay for what you did." But soon I heard a thud, as if someone had been thrown against the wall, and my father's voice, unrecognizable with so much anger, "Touch that door again, and I'll finish you." In the afternoon, I heard the sound of horses in the yard. I looked through the window and saw my older brothers, Oscar, Alfred, and James, mounting their horses, carrying bundles of clothes, leaving at a gallop down the road. My father was in the yard, standing, a rifle in his hands, watching them until they disappeared around the bend. When night fell, I heard soft knocks on my door. "Josie, it's me, your father. Everything is okay. You can open." I opened the door, still afraid. My father was standing in the hallway, his face aged 10 years in one day. His eyes were red, his clothes disheveled. There was a cut on his forehead. "Come, daughter. I want to talk to you." Big. He took me to the living room, where we sat on the old straw sofa. The house was as silent as it had never been before. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "Your older brothers, Oscar, Alfred, and James, are gone. I told them to get out of my sight and never come back. The others are locked in the rooms for now." "And your mother?" He paused, passing his hand over his tired face. "Your mother is in the barn. I'm taking her to town tomorrow." "To town?" "Yes. There's a place there, a hospital for people who aren't right in the head." We remained silent for a moment, absorbing the enormity of what had happened. Then my father took my hands in his, large and calloused. "Josie, why didn't you tell me before? All those trips, all those years." I lowered my eyes, feeling the weight of guilt that wasn't mine, but that I carried anyway. "I was afraid, Dad. Afraid that you wouldn't believe me. Afraid of what they would do when you left again." He squeezed my hands, and when I raised my eyes, I saw that he was crying. My father, that strong man whom I had never seen shed a tear, was crying like a child. "I will never leave you alone again, my daughter. Never again." In the days that followed, our house went through a transformation. My mother was taken to the hospital in Riverdale, as my father had said. The twins, Theodore and Arnold, were sent to work on a distant farm of a cousin of my father's in Charlotte. Eugene and Jerome, the youngest, remained, but under constant vigilance. My father hired Mrs. Catherine to come every day to take care of the house and me when he needed to go out. I was never alone with my brothers again. Gradually, I began to recover. The marks on the body healed, although those on the soul took much longer. I returned to regularly attending school. Miss Zelma, noticing the change in me, gave me special attention, helping me catch up on the missed lessons. It was during this time that I met Louise, daughter of a merchant who had recently moved to the region. She was my age, and soon we became friends. She was the first real friend I had in my life. With her, I learned to play again, to laugh, to be a child. My father kept his promise. He reorganized his work to avoid making long trips. When it was inevitable, he would take me with him or leave me at Mrs. Catherine's house, never again alone on that farm. With time, we sold the property. There were too many bad memories there, shadows in every corner. We moved closer to town, to a smaller but happier house, with large windows that let in the sun. I never saw my mother or my older brothers again. I learned, years later, that Oscar had died in a bar fight somewhere in northern Alabama. Of the others, I never heard news again. Eugene and Jerome, with time and under the firm guidance of my father, became different men than they might have been. We never talked about the past, but there was a silent understanding between us, a line that would never be crossed again. The change didn't happen overnight. There were years of healing, of reconstruction. There were nightmares, crying spells, moments when the past returned like a wave threatening to drown me. But my father was always there, a rock where I could hold on. One day, as a teenager, I found the courage to ask my father about what my mother had said, that horror was a tradition in the family. "Is it true, Dad? Did it happen to Mom too? To Grandma?" My father sighed deeply, his eyes lost in distant memories. "Your mother came from a bad family, Josephine. Very bad. When I met her, she was already broken inside. I thought I could save her with love, with a new life. But some wounds are too deep." He paused, looking at me with eyes full of a mixture of sadness and pride. "But you, my daughter, you broke the chain. You had the courage that no one else had." It was at that moment that I fully understood. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a liberator. With my small rebellion, my refusal to accept the destiny they wanted to impose on me, I had changed the course of generations. I grew up under the care of my father and Mrs. Catherine, who ended up becoming a second mother to me. I studied, became a teacher, following in the footsteps of my dear Miss Zelma. And I promised myself that I would pass on not the horror I had received, but the strength I had discovered within me. The pain didn't disappear completely. It never disappears. But we learn to live with it, to transform it into something useful, a moral compass that guides us to never inflict on others the suffering we have known. And when, years later, I found a good man, married, and had my own children, I definitely broke that cursed cycle that had poisoned my family for so long. I raised my children with love, with respect, with the certainty that they would never know the type of horror that marked my childhood. That's how I won in the end, not just by surviving, but by living, fully, with dignity, with love, transforming pain into purpose, survival into rebirth. Today, at my well-lived 73 years, I wake up every day thanking God for another dawn. My little house here in Asheville is simple, but it's my corner of peace. The blue walls, the windows with lace curtains that I made myself, the plant pots on the porch, everything has a little piece of my story. How I came to Asheville is a love story. I met my Gerald when I was already teaching in Riverdale, me at 25, him at 28. He was a good man, a carpenter by profession, who had come to do a job at the school where I worked. I remember as if it were yesterday, he measuring the windows to make new frames, and I, curious, asking about his work. Our eyes met, and something in that look told me I could trust him. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Gerald knew about my past. I told him everything before accepting his marriage proposal. I thought he might give up on me when he found out, but instead, he held my hands and said, "Josephine, you are the strongest woman I have ever met. It would be an honor to spend the rest of my life by your side." We got married in a simple ceremony, with the presence of my father, already aged but happy to see me moving forward. Mrs. Catherine was there too, proud as if she were my mother, and my friend Louise was my maid of honor. We lived in Riverdale for a few more years until Gerald received an offer to work in a woodworking shop in Asheville. It was too good an opportunity to refuse. We moved in 1982, me already 30 years old. It was difficult to leave my father, but he understood that it was best for us. He visited us whenever he could, until the good Lord took him in 1990. In Asheville, I continued teaching, now at a local public school. Gerald prospered in the woodworking business, eventually opening his own shop a few years later. We were blessed with 3 children, Robert, the oldest, now 47, Claire, our middle child, 45, and Timothy, the youngest, 42. I raised my children with much love and attention, always vigilant that they never suffered what I suffered, but also careful not to suffocate them with excessive protection. It was a delicate balance, and many nights I spent awake, worried if I was doing the right thing. Gerald was a wonderful father, present, loving, firm when necessary, but always kind. Our children grew up knowing the value of respect, honest work, kindness. They never knew in detail what happened in my childhood. I didn't want to stain them with that horror. But they understood that there were pains in my past that sometimes still visited me in nightmares. Life in Asheville was good for us. The city, with its mountain views, its old churches, its air of living history, became our true home. We made friends, got involved in the community. I participated in the church prayer group and the book club. Gerald played guitar at city festivals and helped renovate historic houses. Our children grew up, studied, followed their paths. Robert became an engineer, lives in Atlanta with his wife and 2 children. Claire is a doctor, works at a hospital in Charlotte. And Timothy followed in his father's footsteps, taking over the woodworking shop when Gerald began to feel the weight of age. The years passed, and we saw our family grow with the arrival of grandchildren, 5 in all, each one a different blessing. Whenever they come to visit me, I fill the house with fresh baked goods, tell stories, teach the old recipes I learned from Mrs. Catherine. When Gerald fell ill 10 years ago, I cared for him at home until the end. It was difficult, but it was also a privilege to be able to return all the love and support he gave me throughout our life together. In the last days, he would hold my hand and say, "Josephine, you were the best thing that happened in my life." After he passed, I thought the world had ended for me. The first months were foggy, days when I could barely get out of bed. It was Timothy who helped me find purpose again. He would come every day, take me out of the house, take me for short walks around town. "Mom, you still have a lot to live for," he would say. "Dad wouldn't want to see you like this." And he was right. Gradually, I returned to life. I started taking care of my medicinal herb garden, something that had always interested me. I studied about the properties of plants, experimented with combinations, prepared teas and ointments. What started as therapy for me ended up becoming a small source of joy, an income too, when neighbors started looking for my home remedies. Today, my routine is peaceful and rewarding. I wake up with the sun, say my morning prayer, have my coffee while looking at the mountains through the kitchen window. Then I go to the garden, where I spend most of the morning caring for my plants, harvesting what's ready, preparing my mixtures. In the afternoon, I receive visits, neighbors who come to get some remedy for joint pain or insomnia, friends from the prayer group who come to have coffee and catch up. Sometimes a young mother with questions about how to care for a baby with colic or fever. Timothy stops by almost every day to see if I need anything. My other children call regularly, and at least once a month they all gather here for a Sunday lunch, filling the house with voices, laughter, life. On weekends, I like to sit in my rocking chair on the porch and observe the movement on the street, the children playing, the neighbors passing by and waving, life following its course. Sometimes I pick up a book. I developed a taste for reading as an adult, and today it's one of my greatest pleasures. I don't have luxuries, nor do I need them. My retirement as a teacher is modest, but sufficient for my needs. What I sell from my herbs and home remedies gives me a little extra money for small extravagances. A gift for a grandchild, a new book, a trip to the market to buy that special apple butter that I only find there. I have my health difficulties, of course. The high blood pressure that I need to control, the arthritis that makes my hands hurt on cold days, the back pain that reminds me of all the years lived. But none of this diminishes my gratitude for being here, for having come this far. Sometimes when I'm alone, thoughts return to that farm, to those dark days. I can't say I've forgotten. Some things never completely fade away. But I don't let those memories define me or control my life. They are just one part of my story, not its totality. I learned with time to transform that pain into compassion. When I see someone suffering, especially a child or a woman, I feel it in the depths of my soul. I do what I can to help, even if it's just with a kind word, a calming tea, a sincere prayer. What I'm most proud of, looking back, is having broken that perverse cycle. My children grew up in a home of love and respect. My grandchildren will never know the type of horror that marked my childhood. The chain was broken, as my grandmother asked in that dream so many years ago. And so I continue, day after day, grateful for each dawn, for each small joy, for each moment with my family. Life, with all its difficulties, is a precious gift. And I, Josephine Adams Carter, at 73, here in my little house in Asheville, can say that I learned to live it to the fullest. My dear ones who have accompanied me to this point, I open my heart to share a story that for so many years I kept in silence. It wasn't easy to relive these memories, but I feel it was worth it if my experience can help even a single person. If you are going through situations of abuse, know that you are not alone. Silence is the greatest ally of those who hurt, and words, as difficult as they may be to pronounce, are the first step towards liberation. I took a long time to find my voice, to gather courage to show those stained pieces of sheet to my father. But when I finally did, it was as if a new world opened up before me. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start anew each day. When I look back at that frightened 8-year-old girl I once was, I feel a mixture of sadness and admiration. Sadness for what she suffered, admiration for the courage she found within herself. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I carry on my body the marks of time, and in my soul, the scars of old wounds. But these scars don't weaken me. On the contrary, they are proof that I am stronger than everything that tried to destroy me. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. In the darkest moments of my childhood, when it seemed there was no way out, something inside me refused to give up, to accept that fate as definitive. This small light, which we all have, is capable of illuminating the darkest paths. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. They could hurt my body, but my spirit, my essence, they could never reach. And it's this untouched dignity that allowed me to rebuild my life on solid foundations of love and respect. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. Many times I thought I wouldn't survive another night, another day. But I survived. And you too can survive, can overcome, can rebuild. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. Even today, 70 years later, there are memories that make me shudder. But I've learned not to let them dominate my days, to find joy even while carrying these invisible scars. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I could have become bitter, distrustful, unable to love. Instead, I chose to open my heart, to believe in people, to build a family based on love and mutual respect. This was my greatest victory. I learned that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time. And there were many falls along the way, many moments of despair, of doubt. But each time I got up, I became a little stronger, a little wiser. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but recovery shows that we can flourish even after the storm. Like the plants in my garden, which are sometimes lashed by winds and heavy rains, but then rise again, often stronger than before. Age has given me wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start again. At 30, when I moved to Asheville, I felt I was starting a new chapter. At 63, when I lost my Gerald, I thought my life was over, but I discovered a new purpose. Each phase brings its challenges, but also its opportunities for renewal. For anyone suffering any type of abuse, whether child, young, or adult, my advice is seek help. Today, there are resources that weren't available in my time: hotlines, specialized organizations, professionals prepared to welcome and guide. In every state, in every region, there are people ready to extend a hand to those in need. If you know someone who may be in a situation of abuse, be alert to the signs: abrupt changes in behavior, isolation, unexplainable sadness, physical marks, excessive fear. Sometimes, a kind word, an attentive ear, can be the first step to help someone free themselves. Dignity and respect are universal values no matter where you are. Each of us deserves to be treated with humanity, with compassion, and each of us has the power to make a difference in the life of someone who is suffering. My dear sons and daughters who are watching me now, this grandma has a special request to make. If this story touched your heart, if you identified with it or know someone who may be going through something similar, please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell right now. Each subscription is like an extended hand, a way of saying that stories like mine need to be heard, that the silence needs to be broken. Share this video immediately with people you love and care about. This simple gesture can be the light that someone needs to find courage, to know they are not alone in their pain. How many children, how many women, how many elderly people are suffering at this exact moment, thinking there is no way out? Your sharing can be the first step towards someone's liberation. And leave in the comments the word dignity, so I know you watched until the end, that you heard my complete story and are with me in this mission to break chains of abuse. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Your action can help save lives. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having accompanied me to this point. May God bless each one of you. May He protect your families. May He fill your homes with love and respect. And always remember, no matter how dark the night, the sun always shines again.